Hello, welcome to step 27. A lot of little fiddly parts here. Basically, we're adding a lot more detail to the setup for the winch assembly. We're not going to do this exactly according to how the instructions have it. You'll kind of see what I mean after we get going here. But to start with, let's work on this additional fuel tank. I'm going to go through and put the glue on the main piece rather than the side piece. Just glue that on. Now what I've noticed with these smaller detail parts, and here's a good example right here in this corner, is that there's a little bit more flash. It's not consistent across the whole sprue, so I don't know if it's something that's inherent in the parts, or maybe just as these molds are getting older already, those are the first signs. Not exactly sure what's going on, but pretty simple to glue this together. What you will notice when you're putting this together is that this bottom piece doesn't fit snug, even though it could. It's kind of odd. It doesn't want to sit square, it doesn't want to sit snug. This is the first part that I've run across that kind of is acting like this. So what I'm doing is gluing it, trying to make it square. See, and there's no real reason. There's no, even though this has a little bit of an indent on the side, there's no key. There's no anything else. The main bottom part doesn't fit in between the two sides. I may look into this to see if this is something that needs to be made into a new part on my part. But that gets the tank at least sort of organized in that particular way. And even though I'm unsure, I'm going to go with the fact that this is going to be just fine and glue this fuel filter part G25 on there. Now with that, once we've got this going on, we have other parts to put on here. But basically, this goes on this section right here with the fuel pump going to the side. And this might be, yeah, this is part of why it's kind of set up the way it is. It's not meant to be a standalone sub-assembly. It pretty much squares up and fits much better once it's placed in here, but one side is thicker than the other. That is just an odd setup. There. It goes in, it gets pressed in a little bit harder than I would really normally feel comfortable with. And since it's not made up, the pieces that we put in here, it's not made up of other parts to where maybe I accidentally put them together too close, I'm gonna say that it's just a little bit of a tighter spot. Regardless, instead of worrying about all of the ramifications of it, what I'm going to do is just glue the parts together. The nice thing is that the part E1 here that I'm putting on is going to help the fuel filter stay on. you may want that fuel filter to be straight up and down. This way it's got a little bit of a ting, or a little bit of a lean. But in my experience dealing with inline fuel filters like this setup here, they tend to really not be square. They always tend to have a little bit of a lean or whatever. So it's a point where you can add a little bit of I don't know, variation, flavor, distinction, you know, whatever word you want to use. It just makes it look a little different, especially once it's painted and all that. It brings a little bit of use to the system. Now, I'm not going to put the GP2, 5, or 6 on the reflector, or the light, I mean. But the reflector I will, and that's photo etched part MD17. And there is a little bit of a shape for it, so I just put the glue on. Now it's got a little bit of a rocking motion. I don't know. That was odd. Put a little more glue on there just to tamp that down. Now the other thing in this step is you actually have a step, and you have, these are the grips, and you can see that there's the two spots where they were attached. I'm going to use those on the back side just so I'm not looking at them. But I don't know if they necessarily have to be clamped or cleaned up because they're on the back side of the step. And what I want to see is, I've had experiences where I've been able to use them to help it to stay on the model better. I don't know if that'll help necessarily in this particular time, considering, but I'm willing to give it a shot and see what happens. Now, what I am missing, and I thought I had it sitting here, so I'm not sure exactly where it went, is the razor blade. And I don't want to do too much here because I've got my very small parts laid out. But yeah, somewhere in here I seem to have misplaced my razor blade. That's unfortunate. So what I'm going to do is take my hobby knife just to start bending this up. Yeah, it's unfortunate because this is one place where I think the just pulling this back a little bit so it's square. This is a place where I think the Sorry, don't mind me. I'm looking over how this is going to try and decide. Just give me a moment. So what I'm trying to do is, when you're doing these U channels, you want to make sure that you've got enough room so I can fold that over without causing problems. So there is an etched line on the back, so this should go well, and I'm using the end of my forceps here to help square this up, as much as this is going to be square. And yeah, that came out pretty well. So now what I was getting at is, there's the two little bits on that side. Gotta push this. These two tabs on either end are supposed to be just a little bit wider than the plastic. And honestly, they're darn close. And you kind of sort of need them to be like that to get this in. Well, as you can see, there isn't nearly as much room as, say, on the bottom rungs to get this particular piece in. This is fairly tight fitting. So I'm going to do my best. What I want to do is push that in as close as I can to give myself just enough room to sneak that past. Yep, got it. All the way down on the rung, and then I'll kind of move it back. Now this is all pretty tight. You're talking tenths of a millimeter in being close enough or not close enough, or well, tight enough or not tight enough. And so what I was getting at is that if I had my razor blade, tink tink, I would imagine, but because I'm using my hobby knife, I got to be a little more careful on the back of my forceps. It still works out, and I think that's a pretty good place to show that you don't have to do things, you know, in one particular way or even, you know, optimally. But I would like to know what happened to the razor blade, because I don't necessarily want to find out where that went at an inopportune time. So we'll go back to folding these. Now, just because I have to do a fair amount of this stuff and we're already, you know, 12 minutes in, I'm probably going to have to do this in 2 parts just to keep the video length at a reasonable size. Just so you know, but this step isn't particularly difficult, just a fair amount of photo etch again, and photo etch takes a little bit more work. So again with the hobby knife. Now some people are I'm sure are asking, well, why not just do this in the same thing? You know, put this in, flip it around, fold it up. And I guess I could. In that regard, I don't have to go to the edge. I just happen to like being on the edge there when I was doing it. And then again, this is where having a little bit better tolerance part would be better. But yeah, here's the downside. So I did that, and what's happening is I'm trying to put this in. I'm getting interference from the tread on the actual photo etched part. So what I'm going to do is what I did before. Put this on the end where it overlaps. Or not overlaps, but hangs out. Tighten that up. And I'm going to take the back of my forceps and finish this off. That allows me to square that up nicely, and at the same time be able to work with that little tread piece. So now that I've got that, again, I'm going to find the side that had the 2 little nubs and put them to the back. And the back is, so the 2 bolts are on the front, and the back has no bolt detail. But it's another case of getting those squared in. But because I have the room, I'm able to place that in with a lot less trouble than with the loop up above. Looks good. And then I put my glue in. So, 2 more to go. So why not just put this in here and fold it up? Well, I guess I could, but what I like is that this gives me my my first bend a little bit more solid. I've got something that it's resting on is what I'm getting at. Like so. Now, when I go under here for the first time to do it with the hobby knife, there's, I guess because there isn't a fold already on it, it just works better. Check down my line, my part's on. I'm probably making this a little more complicated than I need to, maybe. I don't think so. I want to do a good job. I'm not in that much of a hurry. Again, still wish I knew what happened to my razor blade, but it's for another time. There's that. I'm just gonna do the folds right now and get them done with. And you can't, it make sure that you're paying attention to how deep you have this in. Because even though it has folding lines, I'm quite sure you could fold this incorrectly, and then you're going to be fighting with something you don't want to fight with, and just no fun. Alright, get that in, or try to get that in. And again, you know, all the fun everybody has dealing with photo etch, or dealing with paint, with model parts, or that's kind of the point of all this, is not putting any sort of gloss over it, not speeding through the hard parts. Hey, you know, this is just me and you hanging out, building a model. So there I went and got the other two steps. Again, looking on the two folded side, which side has the little nubs, put that on the back. Won't be a problem. And try and get the photo etch to slide on. And all I have to do is, say, fold this just 1/10 of a millimeter too tight, or whatever, and all of a sudden it just doesn't want to go on the way that you think it should. Use that to soften the plastic instead a little bit, and I'll see if I can convince this to sit down a little more. Looks like I got it. So, and do our last one. Again, look for the nubs. There they are. Put them in the back. And then, I keep not putting this in the camera, sorry. I'm not used to leaning this far over when I'm working with my photo etch. Now, you'll notice that I'm having a little bit more difficulty with the bottom two than the top two. And again, is that because I folded them a little bit tighter? Don't know. The plastic could be just a smidge thicker. So, I don't know exactly, but what I am doing now is It's just trying to set this up so that it looks good, rather than trying to figure out every issue and what's causing it. Because in the end, it's going to look fine. So there's the piece right there. And here's the setup for the fuel tank. Right there. And our reflector on that side. Now remember, we put the other reflector on in step before, so now at least both sides have the reflectors. And we'll stop right there, and then I'll come back with the second part of this. See you then.